This is the very first session, Cultural Cookies episode. And what I want to do is kind of talk about social media trends that have been relevant or that will be relevant to arts and culture organizations in 2025. Now, that basically came about because I wrote an article with Amy for the arts newspaper, and we wanted to kind of just break that out a bit more and go into a bit more detail about how these can really work. So what I'm going to do today is do it in two sections. So there's going to be the first section, which will be about the trends and what those trends are. So those 5 trends are AI-driven content curation optimization, a focus on niche community building, embracing relevant trends and trending moments, the rise of the influencer and creator economy, and then videos between 90 and 180 seconds. And then we're going to look at not only what those trends mean to cultural organizations, but how you can use them. So those are the kind of the two segments of this conversation today. But before I go into all that, I want to introduce my incredible guests, or let them introduce themselves. Amy, you're next to me, so I'm going to let you go first and let's go around like that.
Yes, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Dawson. I used to be an editor at the art newspaper, and now I'm a freelance arts and culture writer and editor. But I still write my monthly column for the art newspaper, which is called Insta Gratification, which Haydn very kindly contributed to for this month. And it's all about how social media and the art world interact. An accessibility description: I am a white woman in her 30s with dark hair and glasses, and I'm wearing a grey jumper. And a little icebreaker question. Shall I go ahead and say mine? My
Yes,
favorite
let's
social
go.
or
Let's go.
digital
Yeah.
marketing project that I've worked on. I actually don't work on campaigns so much as I write about them, which is a much safer position to be in. I kind of judge it from the outside, which is kind of harsh. But one of my favorite things that I've written about is actually the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, in Massachusetts, America, has this TikTok in residence program,
Oh, wow.
where they get normally like young people who like have a good following on TikTok to come and like work full time, like a paid internship, and just focus on making TikTok content for the museum. And I think it's a really interesting concept, to bring in young blood into a museum and give them like so much access and so much freedom and focus on one platform. And I think it has had some really interesting results.
Yeah, there we go. Go.
Hi, I'm Maria. I'm co-founder of Send It Social. We're a US-based agency working with museums, cultural institutions, and knowledge havers, as we like to call it, people with stories. So we help them repackage those stories, taking a step back, looking at what they have, repackage them, and sharing them in the digital world to hopefully inspire curiosity in audiences and build community with people. So I think it's a very exciting world to be in, as you all know. Far as the accessibility description, I'm a white woman in her 30s. I have short brown hair and I'm wearing a green long sleeve shirt with, I think, floral patterns. My favorite social or digital media marketing project, that's a tough question. I think this one's kind of taking a step back from social media and more in the real world, but facilitating social media. Currently, my team of 3 is working on what I think is a really fun project. We are collaborating with the Museum of Science in Boston to sort of hold an in-person workshop where we'll work with the museum educators. It's a team of about 30 who are already creating amazing social media videos. And we're sort of giving them the tools to keep building on that, and expanding their work. So we'll talk about content ideation, script writing, video presence, camera presence, and actually doing the thing, recording videos. So that's what's been on my mind lately. Super fun project and hoping to
Oh,
do more
good.
of
Love
that.
that. And then Jason?
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Edwards. I'm a cultural marketing specialist. Have worked with Meta, Netflix, amongst others, across film and sort of music for the past 10 years. And my favorite, accessibility. So I'm a black male in his 30s, a grey cardigan, white t-shirt, very Gen Z, with short black hair. And my favorite social campaign that I've worked on in recent years was plugging in via Meta on the recent Wicked campaign. So we were able to create a really groundbreaking creator campaign to amplify the marketing efforts of Universal Pictures. Sorry.
Brilliant. So as you can see, we have some incredible minds here who really understand social or understand the landscape of how trends can impact not just cultural organizations, but culture in general. So I'm not going to waste any more time. We're going to get to the meat and potatoes of it all. So first up, I want to ask a very simple question. And we're going to start, maybe we'll start with you, Jason, and work our way backwards this time. What one social media trend do you think will be the most relevant for cultural organizations, entertainments, or brands going forward in 2025?
I think embracing the real. I think we've seen cultural organizations and museums really lean into Gen Z culture, and I think we've seen a lot of them do really well. So whether it was the Royal Armouries Museum deciding to lean into Slay, which in historical terms means to kill someone, and in the Gen Z term, means to sort of like do really well at something. I think when we see these really authentic, um, these authentic takes on Gen Z trends, I think that will be something that continues to grow. I think when we look at sort of like the rise of vertical short form content across TikTok and Instagram, I see that they're just going to keep honing their strength at like really leaning into their like rich cultural capital that they have. So even when I look at like Threads, for example, the National Trust is really good at really using their archive of like great art and really putting it into modern day terms to engage young audiences.
Yeah, no, I really agree. And I think that is something I'm on the fence with trends because with me, I really do love trends when they're done well, but I don't like when people use trends to bully, if that kind of makes sense. So
Yeah.
sometimes you'll get those bigger brands who are I remember there's one organization. There's a thing about Brad Pitt recently, and I won't say the brand, but Brad Pitt. There was a French lady who had thought she was dating Brad Pitt, unfortunately, and obviously she wasn't. And that went on for a while. And the issue, what happened was that brands jumped on that, and when the big brands jumped on that, that obviously added more to the lady's stress and things of that nature. But what I do like is when brands do it well. So like when you look at the South Bank Centre, when they did their version of Brat Summer and they combined it with what's the other trend? They combined it with another trend, sorry, that escapes me, but they did it really well because they took two trends that were working. So demure, that's the demure trend.
Yeah.
They took the Brat Summer and the demure trend, two trends that were working really well, and they added their own take on it to make something that was unique for them. And I thought that was really cool.
It can be really hard for not just museums, but like brands and anyone to get trends right and to not jump on the wrong thing just because it's popular. And I think it's very, I mean, you can't train that. I don't know. You just get used to it over time by being on social yourself and seeing how other people are working with trends. But for example, there's I was thinking about the British Museum last year jumped on this trend that was I wrote about it. It completely basically was a complete backlash against it. It was a video that riffed on
Yes, I remember.
asking men how they pondered the Roman Empire because it was about their show life in the Roman army. And another trend about women looking for suitors by acting confused at hardware stores. And it said something like, if girls, if you're girlies, if you're looking for a guy, why don't you come to our museum exhibition and ask questions about the Roman Empire or something? And it was received so sexist, and people like completely lost their crap, especially on Instagram, which is obviously full of like millennials looking for a fight. Um, and so you have these real success stories of like writing the script Gen Z, which loads of museums had success with, lots of other brands obviously had success with, but then you never know if you're jumping on a trend and doing it really badly, and if it's gonna like make you look like really out of date and stupid.
I think with trends, you've got to really think about one, the platform it's on, and the fact and the size of your organization. So, will that content travel outside of that other platform to where other audiences who know you for one thing will see it in a different light? And then you've also got to just think about the culture norms of the world. Where is the world? How are you perceived as an organization? Does that does that joke work well based on how you're perceived as an organization? So there's those kind of there should be some kind of guardrails for cultural organization, arts marketers to think about, okay, what trends can we realistically navigate that makes sense to us?
Yeah, I'd say like definitely like use human judgment and read the room as well.
Yeah.
And I think also one thing that, and I've worked in offices where people are like, we have to jump on this trend, is like do research into like its origins, who's taking part and who's led it, because you will often see that there are things that are so far removed from the origins, but they're so inappropriate. And I think especially as like bigger brands and people with like cultural heritage, such as, you know, many of the museums and people and organizations in the arts, it can be a real minefield. So I'd say like definitely consult with more than the Gen Zs in your office, and make sure that you are able to you know, really really ensure that you don't get into hot water. But going back to the original question around the trend, is like, I think people are getting, or organizations are getting smarter in short form video, and how to really like ensure that they can encapsulate their message within that sort of like window of time that they have. And I think, you know, we'll continue to see that. I think we'll continue to see people really like pushing for like genuine, authentic and organic content. Often, you know, social media was seen as like a transmit, you know, get ticket sales to this event that we're having, or this activation. And I think what you'll start to see is like the brand awareness can actually get those ticket sales. So we'll see more of the sort of like authentic, organic, you know, short form video creation.
I love that. Maria?
I love that. Yeah, just doubling down on the creating genuine, authentic connections. I think, you know, when thinking about museums in the past where people maybe perceive them to be a bit more like, oh, I can't go in there. That's a bit too stuffy for me. Or maybe, you know, they're experts, or I don't know anything about art. I think when you create content that's like, you know, plays the humor or is relevant to people who might not otherwise see themselves going to an institution like that. I just think it does create those connections, can lead to ticket sales. And yeah, you know, as you all said already, like there is a fine line, right? Because what I hear a lot of the times is people saying like, oh, how can you keep up with like all the trends? The good news is you don't have to. You can't. And I don't think I advocate for, or I don't advocate for doing every single trend. As we saw, sometimes it's not a good idea. Definitely picking and choosing. But just saying, I love this idea of those genuine connections where you see the people behind the account and it's not a brand anymore. It's like, it's people, just, you know, like you and me.
Which leads nicely to your trend. What is your trend that you think will really have impact this year?
I'm betting all in on niching down. So I think, you know, creating niche communities online is the way to go for this industry. As we all know, there's like so much noise out there in the digital landscape. And sometimes it's like, oh, I don't think I can make a dent in there. It's oversaturated. But I think museums, cultural institutions, they just have the possibility of being really intentional about the content they make. And they're already coming at it with so much expertise in niche areas, right? And, you know, as Jason said, creating those genuine connections with people, you know, whether it's with audience members who already have interests that overlap with your museum, or someone who maybe you piqued the curiosity with a reel that had, or maybe it was like a trend, right? Just piquing curiosity that way. Um, in the past, and you mentioned this, Hayden, in your article, there was such a focus on like follower count. And I think 100% that's changing. I think now it's quality over quantity. You know, even the founder of Patreon, Jack Conte, had a talk, I think last year, South by Southwest, where it was titled The Death of the Follower. And he brings up this notion of you don't need like a million followers to be successful. You need like 1,000 true fans. So that whole theory of 1,000 true fans that will follow you, will advocate for you, will share your content with others because they're so connected to you. You know, that niche spoke to them and they see themselves in it somehow. And, you know, when you think about platforms like changing or potentially going away, if you have those 1,000 true fans, they're going to follow you, right? So then, you know, all the more reason to invest in your community and go deeper on engagement that way. And just like a big overarching, getting a little doom and gloom here, but the whole idea of social isolation being on the rise and the loneliness economy, you hear about that. Being able to, as an institution that brings people together in real life, kind of having that same power to do it online and create those third spaces, even, I'm going to venture out and say, creating those third spaces where people can like connect and feel a sense of belonging and just contribute that way, has, again, so much potential. I'll stop there. I feel like I can keep riffing.
And I think there's a lot in the niche. And when I talk about niche communities, I think there's 5-point-something billion people using social media in today's era. So when you think about that, niche can be 100,000, 200,000, a million. Like a niche can be really big when it comes to generating a community of people who want to engage with you. And obviously, there's the people who are doing it really well, like the Tank Museum, who have really got to grips with how to do that really well and how to build an audience specifically online, which everybody refers to, but they refer to them because they've done it so well. And there's so many more lessons from cultural organizations all around the world who can take their content and say, how can I tell these stories? Or how do I, maybe like the Sacramento History Museum, how do I say, okay, I'm going to find something that I think is really niche, but really relevant to us, that's going to generate conversation, that's going to make people interested in what we do. And people keep referring back to these two examples because they're so good, but they're examples that every culture organization can jump on and they can actually try and do themselves. And the bigger lesson to it is the fact that you have to be purposeful. You have to make sure that you've kind of, okay, we're going to do this strategy, we're going to stick to it, we're going to give some time to it, we're going to give consistency to it. And you don't need to have a lot of followers. I don't particularly have that many followers on LinkedIn, but I generate reasonably good impressions and on monthly impressions from it without having thousands of followers. So it's about you being consistent and being genuine about the stories you're trying to tell to build communities. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was also.
Sorry.
You go.
We always want to talk at the same time. We're so in sync. I was just going to say that, I've been guilty at times of measuring social media success by follow account. So I have done for 5 years now, added up the number of social media followers of the major museums in the world, which, by the way, is not a fun job. You should see the spreadsheets. And like ranked them, because the art newspaper does this for like in-person attendance figures. They do it every year to see like, how many people are actually going to individual museums and individual exhibitions. And so I started being like, well, a lot of people don't and can't go to these museums. So I want to see what they're like, how many followers do they have, what is their digital kind of attendance. And the problem is that there's no way to measure success of social media accounts or presence from the outside. From the inside, you've got all this wonderful statistics if you're doing it right, but you don't necessarily share those with the outside world. They're for you and your own data and understanding. But from the outside, when I'm trying to, as a writer, look and see like who's doing a really great job, not just on an individual post or campaign level, but in general, what do you have to look at except follower numbers? And I think that is that's a hard one, and it's the same people say about attendance figures in person. It doesn't necessarily mean success, because it might not be revenue driving, it might not be good for them to have so many numbers, like maybe it's super crowded and not having a great experience. Like there's loads of things you need to take into account. And so I am going to commit to trying to not judging a social media account by its follower count.
I think with that, there is a lot of, so if you're looking at it from a standpoint of what that looks like, their engagement looks like, how people responded to their posts, it's a bit more work, admittedly, but those kind of things, even if you look for engagement rate, that there's different apps or platforms where you can just get Instagram's engagement rate. So even if you just look at their engagement rate, how high is their engagement rate in return to the number of followers, stuff like that will give you a better indication of, okay, there might be a small organization, but are they doing well? Or are there there's a lot of bigger cultural organizations who have a lot of followers just because of the fact they're a bigger organization, but their content, if we're going to be brutally honest, isn't the greatest. So
Yeah,
it's
because
just that.
the accounts we talk about are like the Crab Museum or the Tank Museum. You know, it's the quirky little weird ones that really make a splash,
Yeah,
and they don't have the
Nick's on
same.
the line, so Nick, you're not weird. Trust me, Nick is. Nick for the tech saying you're not weird. Come on.
And special. No, you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
Okay.
Jason, you go.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, in like addition to that, what I've seen is like when you look at like TikTok and sort of like the Reels economy, and like everything's geared towards like explore pages and really tailored algorithms. So I think like a lot of these organizations will have these like legacy followers that they're just not serving. And I think what we've seen over the past 5 years with like the rise of video is like, and the rise of AI is that content is so specific to you, and your FYP, your explore page, everything is going to be so tailored that, you know, like if you're the Royal Arms Museum, or you're the, you know, the what is it, the Candy Museum in LA, like people are going to find you're going to find your audiences, and once you find them, it's really about like tailoring your content to super serve those people, and hopefully that community grows in sort of like, if you've ever read about like the origins of cults and how they grow, it's just people are being so you know, they're really being so like super served with the content they want, and they've really identified audiences. And as you say, like niche, especially in the social media age, like before your local museum might like reach the people in your town or city, whereas like we're in such a global economy, like you'll get people saying like, I need to visit Prague to go to this museum, and I need to go to Brooklyn to go to this one, that you can really like reach people outside of like your immediate ecosphere, and you can really have that global reach and find those people who are going to travel and really support you, and hopefully, you know, buy tickets and support the arts.
No, I love that.
Total, like real quick, like, I mean, how many people knew they liked snails before they saw the, you know, Carnegie Museum of Natural History? Tim Pierce, right? Before he was telling all his snail jokes. Like, that's such a niche example, but same
It
thing.
works.
Same thing.
Amy, what is your trend? What trend do you think will have the most impact?
Yeah, I'm fully in belief that 2025 might be the art and culture influencer year. But influencer is such a dirty word, I think, in the arts and culture community. And unlike other industries like fashion and beauty, you really haven't seen influencers kind of crack arts and culture. And I think it's because partly it's museums really want to distance themselves from what they think influencer means. And I think there's been a bit of a turn in the kind of dialogue, in that we use the word creator a lot more now than influencer, although they can be quite interchangeable at times. Because an influencer has never really been this vacuous person who just like records nonsense all day. They've always been quite clever people really thinking about what good content is, how to draw in audiences, just like big organizations, but on a small individual scale. And now that we've started to think a lot more about creators, and now I think that platforms are caring and thinking a lot more about creators rather than brands and institutions. There's a lot more focus on developing creators and helping them to make their mark on platforms, because they're really the draw. I think that you're now seeing creators / influencers entering the art world in a much bigger way. I used to see them like quietly at press previews. They would be invited to see exhibitions at museums before the public with the press, or sometimes even like in a session after the press, so that we didn't mingle. And it would be like a separate list. You know, you'd have your press list and you'd have your influencer list, and that would sometimes include like celebrities as well as like social media people. And more now, you start seeing institutions shouting about the fact that they're working with influencers and creators. And one really big example last year was the National Gallery in London, for their 200th anniversary, started this program of a network of creators. They called it NG 200. No, it's like something network creator. I can't remember. And I did write about it on the art newspaper if anyone wants to go and find it. And they brought together 200 influencers, and people applied for the position of being an influencer for the National Gallery, and they would get free membership to come in and make content, and National Gallery would promote it. And they then narrowed it down to have 20 key creators that they gave unparalleled access to, and partnered and collaborated on posts and commissioned work. And they were people from all different kinds of arts and also not arts. So there was like a ceramicist, a drag queen, a comedian. There were painters, people who like teach art educators, people who like, so like do social posts about history or mythology, or so many different things, but that in some way were tied to art and culture. And it's had such a huge impact, and it's also made really interesting content for the National Gallery, who are good at content anyway. They have a great digital team, but it's really brought in so many different perspectives and different people. And I think there's going to be a lot more of that. And people that I've spoken to have participated in the National Gallery program have had lots of museums messaging them, asking them to do something similar with them. So I think it's spreading. It's spreading like quietly under the surface, but I think it's going to become a lot more normalized to have the press mixing with the influencers, and like for it to not be a dirty little secret anymore that influencers are part of the art world.
I think that's a good point. I think we do need to reframe how we see the word influence and what it means. And I think that, and there's also the understanding of how influencers and creators can work. Because there was nuances between it. So influencers will tend to create content that's on their pages, for example, that will stay on their pages, and then sometimes they'll collab with the organization and on both pages. But then you can get creators who sometimes the organization just wants to work with the creator, and that content will just be on the organization's page, for example, and it might not be on the creator's page. So even just getting that understanding of how you can work with influencers or creators is going to be really important. And I also think there's so many good ones, and I always scream out this organization. I actually came across it because of Marie. Actually, the Gaze Art, to me, GAZE, is one of the most incredible social media or creators within the arts world, because they just make really fun videos, and you start to see a lot more creators in that space creating similar types of content. But I think that's going to really spread, and I think there's real potential there to reach audiences. And I think that if you're trying to grow organically or trying to grow without paying for ad space or paying for ads, connecting with influencers is definitely the way forward, I would think.
I also just to add to that thing, like creator marketing's become so much more sophisticated. I think there was a time where 15 years ago you would just go to an agency and get 10 Love Islanders to come to your gallery who didn't care, or other people who were not aligned. And I think now people are actually like people of influence and who are genuinely interested in campaigns and galleries and other things as well. So I think it's become a lot more it's become a lot more prevalent having like really like a curated guest list of people who actually care, people who authentically like what you're selling or what you're exhibiting. And I think in that instance, it is fine to have those people mixed with journalists because they're also experts in the field. Whereas I think before it was sort of like pay for play. Anyone who had a spare slot in their diary would come along and post a generic post about your sort of exhibition or whatever else was happening at that time. So I think in that respect, it isn't a dirty word anymore. I think, and also the fact that more lay people like all of us could become people with voices online and technically are influencers. And people who have an interest and really can add value to an exhibition or a campaign.
Right, and they're adding that like the human touch too. I mean, not to say the institutions don't have that, but like the thing with creators too is you have that trust there between the audience and the person because the whole authenticity thing going on. So I think it just helps people like connect that way too, right? Smaller creator to the
That's the
institution.
whole, like, even when we talk about niches, like if you double down on a niche or a practice or a topic area, you're going to get people within that who are experts in that space. And just from bringing them through, and they'll have their own communities, that again is working with an influencer. I think during the whole Romeo and Juliet saga, when they were upset that Juliet was a black girl, and there was a doctor or a doctor of history or Shakespeare, I believe, who did a really good piece for the Globe about the fact that the different types of people who played Juliet, the different and what it's been historically. And to me, that was an influencer piece, because the person was an expert in their field. That was an influencer piece, and it's a really good piece to combat the pushback for the Juliet. So I think there's so many ways that you can talk about how you connect with someone who's an influencer or a curator, to tell the stories you want to do, to help form narratives that are going to be relevant, not just to you, but to the world at large, I believe.
Yeah. I think it's so hard for museums to often find like a face, like an actual person to speak for them, who has all those skills of being like good in front of the camera, able to like express themselves in a dynamic and interesting way. Like that person doesn't always exist on a museum or a gallery or even a brand team. And so in a way, this is a bit like you're going out and finding someone who has the experience and knowledge of how to do this for you, and has a knowledge of where you're coming from, and has an interest in your industry. It's not different to working with, an expert in any other field. You get someone in to help. And I really do think that can be the case. Again, you can pick badly when it comes to choosing your influencer. And so there's lots of companies out there that help. I know that the National Gallery had help to they had people apply, but then when it came to kind of sorting through profiles and things, they had help from like social media experts that do this kind of agent work all the time. So, there's also professional help out there to find individuals.
I think that, go on,
Yeah,
go on.
I was going to say one thing as well that really works is sort of advocacy. So, like not just having like a sort of like one and done campaign. I think like when you see organizations work with people who have genuine interest over and over again and really build like ambassadorship, I think that's a really good way to engage creators and influencers in the arts as well.
Okay, so we're going to move on because time is chipping away. I could definitely talk about this forever, but so what I want to talk about now is we've kind of touched on three really good ones there. What I want to kind of ask is, how can cultural organizations really embrace using these tools? So we've kind of talked about the creator economy and influencers. We've talked about trends and niching down, and we've talked about, what was the other one we talked about? It escapes me. Sorry, let's get my notes up. Oh, we've only talked about two of them. Trends. Trends, focus on the niche communities, embracing relevant trends, and the rise of influencers. So, how can they use? How would you suggest? We'll just go through this quickly one by one. How do you suggest that cultural organizations really embrace niching down? What does that look like for a cultural organization from a team standpoint? What does that look like in terms of how do they start to do that? Marie, do you want to go? I can go, whatever.
Sure. Just real quick to kick it off. Like, I think, obviously looking internally, like there are multiple natural history museums, there are multiple art museums, but what makes like yours stand out? And, it could be the artifact, like maybe there's something special that you can, like the printing press, right? The Sacramento History Museum, that in itself is special, but would it be as special if we didn't have Howard, the volunteer, showing it? Like, so you can also look at the people's personal passions, their quirks, even like what makes them stand out. So yeah, kind of taking a step back internally and seeing from the inside real quick.
Can I add to that? I was going to say also look at like what your genuine fans are talking about around your organization. So like look at Reddit, look at what people are saying on Facebook. What are those microcosms of conversation that are happening that you can really like jump into? I think like trying to create a conversation is harder than joining one which is already happening. So I would say, like, for the arts, like, look at what are the observations people take when they go to an exhibition, and talk about online, and how can you sort of like really like zone in on that and make the conversation feel really authentic, or be part of that
I love that as
conversation.
well. And then there's also the idea of picking a platform that makes the most sense for you and the skill set you have at your organization. So if you're going to niche down, think about what platform you want to do that on. Think about how you can consistently create content for that platform in a way that feels I think maybe authentic is the wrong word, but feels manageable for you to be able to actually continually talk about this and read to an audience. I think what Jason just said is a great point about you don't have to go out and recreate the wheel. It's about finding, where do you find those people who are already doing something, and start to maybe follow their work and see what they're doing, see what the communities are talking about before you engage in trying to create your own introduction to that space. So there's something to do with that research part. So make sure you're researching the niches properly and you understand how you can connect it to what you're trying to achieve as an organization as well.
There was another interesting thing that you wrote in the article, Hayden, about using tools that the platforms are, providing us now, and one of which is the close friends kind of program that you have on different apps. And also broadcast channels, the number of broadcast channels I get invited to now, like that are like specifically like social media or art world or whatever. Learning how to use those and then choosing those followers who engage with you the most, that are always looking at your stories, those kind of always like on your reels, and having those in there means that you're putting new or different or even sometimes the same content to people who A, are loyal in one way or another, and B, are most likely to actually do something with the information that you're giving. And so I think that that's a really good way to use it. You think of like the close friends function as something that you use as an individual personally, like so that you can share information about like your family or like pictures of your baby without the world seeing it or whatever. But organizations can do that too, and I think that that's really a really nice way to make, like, if I get invited by a museum to be a close friend, I'm like, oh, hello. Oh, I can say I'm social media VIP. So I think that that's like quite a nice tool to use and to explore if you're not already using it.
Definitely.
Yeah, one quick example, it's not the close friends list, but like even a Facebook group sometimes makes sense, like the National Quilt Museum in Kentucky, I want to say. I might be wrong, but they created a Facebook group for quilters. It's free to anyone, and they share, like, I think it's called Block of the Month, and so they share textiles, patterns, and they created a whole community that's very real to
I love
the
that.
museum.
I think MoMA, I always call it MoMA. MoMA, they have just launched a WhatsApp page, for example. I know they've got a WhatsApp group on MoMA. And I think the Vatican Museum is the only other cultural organization on WhatsApp who has their own specific group community. So there's different places you can try and go to try and create these kind of platforms. All right, I'm going to ask another one quickly. So what do we think about the creator economy? How can people do that internally? I'll kick that off. So we're looking at, how can you find the people within your organization who are passionate about what they do, about the exhibits, and that can, and as Maria said, that can be anybody, because obviously Sacramento History Museum was a volunteer, and who originally, the original person was a front of desk person, so the front of desk person and a volunteer who made their TikTok explode and go from the way it did. So how do you find those people within your organization who can maybe potentially be the face of a content series or have ideas for stories that you can tell? We now live in an age where we don't really talk about AI a lot, but where you can create AI, where you can use AI to really help you create content through efficiency. So, okay, how to write your script. It can help you write your script. It can help you to create craft ideas from the different subject matters that you have in your organization. So really thinking about how you can build that internal team and how they can tell those stories from your organization using different tools like AI, or using the knowledge of a curator who's been there for years, who really understands the dynamics of the organization, is a good place to start, even when you think about just what influencers to work with, because maybe you'll find a really cool niche topic and you say, okay, if I can match this with an influencer, that could help as well. So just really thinking about how you'd go about that.
I think it's really good as well to have like guidelines around these kinds of things, around influencer stuff. It's all well and good kind of like just DMing someone and being like, shall we work together? But these things always end better when there's some kind of understanding of expectation and how things should go down. And obviously, if you're a bigger institution, this is a lot easier to do. Like the National Gallery obviously had to put like lots of things in place for their 200 creators program, to make sure that everyone was getting something out of it. No one was feeling like, you know, they were being used unfairly or whatever. And so it's a good idea to kind of like have a look at, it's not necessarily a contract so much as sending over kind of, these are expectations from our side, what are your expectations, and having agreements like that, because it's still business at the end of the day. Like even if we're working in the creative sector, and even if these people are like influencers or creators on the side of something else, it's still a transaction. And the best way to make sure that everyone is happy and that it ends well is to make sure that everyone knows exactly what's expected.
And I also think in the arts, one of the reasons why I love working in the arts sector, especially with museums, and I'm getting to feeling that it's the same in America, but I know it's definitely the case in the UK. You can reach out to your colleagues, like you really can, and they really will share a lot of information with you that you probably wouldn't get if you was working at a corporate or a brand or something like that. Like you can really reach out to your colleagues and ask them, okay, how did you do this? Have you got anything you can share with us? Any insights? Any frameworks? Don't be scared to do that, because in the UK, I've honestly found that cultural organization, and I'm sure it's the same in America. They really do. Are just happy, yeah, go take it. Like, this is how we did it. Let's jump on this at a call. So don't be scared to reach out.